Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and today I thought it was time to go over Harry again, do a bit of a drive, go through what is good with the car, what still needs to be fixed on the car, and answer one of those questions that I know a lot of you have been asking from the start, and something that I'm quite keen to know is how much does it actually weigh? All right, guys, thanks for coming back. And if you haven't seen this before, obviously this is Harry, my 1974 911 that is dressed up to be inspired by a 1973 RSR race car. And I've done my own tweaks to it. If you've missed, I'll put a link to the full build video up above so you can catch up and think about subscribing. It definitely helps me out. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I try and keep this as scientific as possible. So I have gathered myself here a bunch of ballast and some bathroom scales. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get my weight to as close to exactly 100 kilos as possible to try and keep the whole thing balanced and sort of fair, so I know what we're going to weigh. Now, I know the scales that I'm going to are only accurate to the closest 20 kilos. So again, that's why I want to make sure that it's exactly sort of 100 kilos I am, so I can take that off and it's not going to be swayed, particularly if it's on the edge and it bounces between, you know, a 20 and 40 kilo margin. You don't really know where in that 20 kilo range it is, so I don't want my weight to be a factor of tipping it one way or the other. So I've got my ballast here, and if I pick up my ballast and check on the scales, 100.3. So there we go, I've got my ballast. I know that I'm pretty much bang on 100 kilos, so I'm not going to throw the weight out on the car. So let's go and get in the car now and go for a bit of a drive, and let me take you through some of the things that are good about the car and some of the things that are not so good about the car. All right, guys, I'm now out driving again in Harry, and first up, I want to say, oh wow, how much better this car is to drive now with this clutch. It is night and day. It's like a completely different car. That clutch was so bad, and because it was the only way I ever drove the car, I didn't realize really how bad it was and how much it affected the driving of the car, and it really was just awful. And now it's still a heavy clutch, nowhere near as heavy as it was, and it's quite livable. It's quite easy to drive in traffic. The big issue was before was releasing the clutch, and it would grab and you wouldn't be able to release it smoothly, so that you taking off was always sort of a juddery, shuddery, horrible mess, and just not good to drive. So it is a huge step up in the drivability of this car, and I am absolutely loving it. And having a speedo now that works, that's just I know it's a little thing, and I always used the GPS on my phone in the past, but actually being able to have the proper gauge, and like I mentioned before, the speed is less of an issue than the odometer, and not knowing how far I'd traveled, you know, for service intervals, for everything. I'm not planning on selling this car, so I'm not sort of concerned about putting kilometers on it, but I want to know from my own records how far I've gone and what I've done in it. So on that side of things, all the gauges are now working. Well, when I say they're all working, sort of. The tacho in this car has been an issue the whole time I've owned it. So what I mean by that is it works, but I had an issue that the dampener inside the tacho was not working properly. So when you accelerate, change gears, the needle would fall and then sort of bounce until it sort of leveled out again, and sort of, you know, if you're changing gears and driving fast, it bounces around. You didn't know where you were. It needed basically like a shock absorber inside the needle to slow it down. some older cars that have issue with getting an odd signal from the distributor, so the needle will jump around all over the place, and that's a different issue to what this is. And I did a lot of research, and there's no easy way for me to fix it myself. I tried to. I pulled the Tacho out and actually pulled the needle off, and the needle pokes through a hole, and I cut some sleeves off of some wire that fit over the needle. So I sort of basically built out the needle and put some grease on it, so it was just touching the sort of the gauge surround itself to try and sort of create some resistance. But that just makes the needle get stuck in weird spots, and it still sort of works, but not really. So that's something I'm going to have to send away. It's not something I can actually do myself. Trust me, I've tried. I've looked everywhere. If any of you guys know that I can just get a part and change it, that'd be great, and tell me where I can get it. But I can't find it. So that's something that I do need to address. It's a minor thing, but it's something that I will do very soon. I'm going to send it away just when I remember. Otherwise, the interior of this car is great, and I am really, really happy with the dash. Not so much these centre vents that I put in. I think I will change them over to the 964 vents. I put these in when I did the air conditioning conversion, and they do give better range of motion than the 964 vents do. You can actually swing them all the way around, but the 964 vents look so much nicer than these, and I haven't really done a great job of the dash itself, cutting the hole in there and stuff. It really needs to be pulled out, and I'll probably retrim the dash, but that means pulling the windscreen out again, and I don't want to go through that headache again. It works, and that brings me on to the air conditioning. The air conditioning works and is fantastic. There's a couple of things I still need to do. In a previous video I did mention that to get it on this car, when you put the fan on, it also is the lever that opens the top vents. So you have to have full fan and have all the vents open. Where basically what I'm going to put in is put in an override so that I can just have a full fan switch and leave it just coming out of the face vent. So in the heat of summer, when you just want it sort of blasting straight at you, that will assist it and make a much more efficient air conditioning system. The other thing that I still need to do is I want to tint the windows on this car, and I don't want to have a dark looking tint. So there is actually a almost clear UV tint that I'm going to get put on this car. I might try and do the windscreen, although I don't believe it's legal, and I don't think the place will do it, but I may just do it myself. I'll just see. But I think that's going to make a big difference, because the heat that comes through the glass is a big factor on this car. The carpet I'm not in love with. I think I want to do something about that later in the floor mats. Still not happy with how I did that, but I was learning, and I'm going to continue to learn and get better at these things. So that's something I can tackle at a later date. Now, as far as how the car runs, I know a lot of you keep asking about whether I've gone to the dyno again and got a full dyno figure in, that I was slightly disappointed with my previous run. The car runs great, particularly since I put the new exhaust on it. When it goes, it goes. Very happy with the response of this engine. The torque through the rev range is really good. It's a great fun car to drive, and like with the new clutch, it's fantastic. So I'm not really planning on going to the dyno again, because it's an expensive thing for a number that I don't really care about. I think this new exhaust has definitely opened it up and freed it up, and it's doing better. But air-cooled 911s are probably the worst value for money horsepower you can buy, and yeah, you can spend a lot of money and you still don't make big figures, but drivability is fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about the outside of the car and how it's going. Like you've seen, I've taken this car on a big road trip around Tasmania for 8 days, done some dirt roads, and it's showing signs of use. It's definitely not a show car. It is a car that I use, and I use it the way it's supposed to be used, and I'm really happy with how it's holding up. It's got a bunch of stone chips. It still actually has the damage on my front guard that I did back when I was building this car. It's probably 5 years ago almost now, well before I ever got it running, and I'm not that concerned. It still looks good, and yeah, and I'm going to use it. I'm not going to wrap it up in cotton wool. It's a car that is meant to be used. So one big cosmetic change that I didn't think would be such a big deal on this car that I've done recently is I changed the tyres over. Now, I've always had an issue with this car because of the width of the rims. I have 17 by 8s on the front and 17 by 10s on the rear. 17 by 8s, there are heaps of choices for tyre. 17 by 10s are that in-between size that's really quite difficult to find tyres for. And I really struggled. And the only match set I could find was a set of Falcon street tyres, and they weren't very good at all. The rear tyres were not very good. They were too big. They just, the whole car sat on a massive rake, and they looked ungainly. I narrowed the width of the fronts, a 235, and I've gone down to a 225, which is much better. But when I did that, instead of having the match Falcons and rears, I actually had some Michelin PS4s on the front. And the trouble was is they gripped too well, and on the track, I was just tail happy everywhere, and the rears just would not stick, and it's fun, but it's really slow. Predictable, and it just really hampered my proper enjoyment of the car. That's when I talked to some other people who've got the same wheels on the car, and they were running 255s, which I thought were going to be too narrow on the rear, and have that sort of really narrow stretched look that's cool on JDM cars, which I had in the past, but I really didn't want it for this car. But because they're a bigger profile, they actually don't look too stretched, and they actually sit and look quite good on the back of the car, and also they're slightly narrower so that they'll tuck in and won't have the same issues that my previous ones did, where they're rubbing in the arches. These are actually a smaller diameter and narrower, so they're actually giving me heaps of clearance on the back while still looking good, and the car just looks so much more balanced now. It sits the way it should sit, and I am so much more happy with the looks of this car. The only other thing that does get me on this is that the front wheels sit in too far, and that's something I've got an issue with the front bar. I cannot go any wider because it touches the front bar, so I'm going to have to completely redo the front bar if I'm going to fix that, which I'm not really racing to do at the moment, so it's going to stay. As far as the last sort of thing goes, is how usable is this car and how much do I actually use it? I actually use this car quite a bit. It's quite a comfortable car to use on a reasonable daily basis. Surprisingly, I really like the seats. I really thought these seats would be uncomfortable on long trips and really hamper the driving, and they really don't. I did, as I said, my whole 8 days in Tasmania, driving from sun up to sundown every day, and the seats were perfect and not uncomfortable. I was quite comfortable the whole time. The main issue with this car on long trips is it's loud. Now I have the sound deadening and I don't get much road noise, but that exhaust is quite loud and it does drone a bit, and that is something that I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do. It's not just the exhaust though, it's the intake noise, which sounds fantastic from the ITBs, and there's nothing much I can do about that because it's so good. So that's just something I have to live with. So the stereo doesn't really work unless you're driving slowly around town, but as I said, on highway speeds, it's earbuds in and just listen to some music, and that's just the way you have to drive it. Alright, so and another way to try and keep this nice and even is I'm going to fill the tank up now. I know that this is an 80, I think it's an 82 litre tank or something like that. So basically 80 litres of petrol works out to weighing about 60 kilos. So again, I want to make it on a full tank so that it's not sort of some weird measurement that, oh yeah, it's on a quarter of a tank, so I sort of save some weight. It's, you can take that off or add it or whatever, but on a full tank with full fluids, everything basically to keep it as accurate as I possibly can. So let's fill up now. Pulling in now to the local tip, which has a weighbridge, and we're about to see what the car actually weighs, see what the figure is. Okay, so this Skoda Octavia, with whatever he's got in it, weighs 1,620 kilos. Let's see what we weigh. Goes back down to 0. Harry's a bit of a hefty one. I was thinking it was going to be about 1,050 kilos, and I was wrong. Taking off my ballast, 100 kilos of ballast, with a full tank of fuel, it's 1160. So it's hefty, but let's factor into that. On this car, we have 3-layer sound deadening in the floor, which definitely helps with road noise. But having the ITBs right behind me sort of takes that away, so that's not great. I have a roll cage in the back, which is reasonably heavy. I have the electric air conditioning system, which is, you know, quite a bit of weight that I've added in there with dual condensers, and well worth it. So probably heavier than I was hoping. I was thinking it was going to be lighter than that, but overall I think it's well worth the extra weight, and it really drives beautifully. So alright, well that was interesting. Not what I expected. I was actually thinking Harry was a little bit lighter than that, but the scales don't lie. And seems like Harry weighs in at 1,160 kilos, including a full tank of fuel, which is 60 kilos, and that is plus or minus 20 kilos. So I'll put the pounds up here so you guys who haven't come into the modern world yet can still understand. And yeah, we that's where we're at. Overall, I love this car. It's staying around. It's not going anywhere. It's a constant evolution, and there's lots of little things, like I said, that I'm just going to keep tweaking and just keep refining and getting better. So it's definitely not the last we've seen of Harry on the channel. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Do all the things, like, subscribe. Join us on Patron if you want to watch the videos a day early, ad-free. And remember, if you want to buy parts for any of your Porsches, including hot rods like Harry, even weighty ones, remember to compare prices at pushpartsbyjeff.com first. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.